Welcome to this explainer. We so often buy into this illusion that sleep is just turning off at the end of the day, like flipping a switch on your laptop. But today, we're popping the hood to look at the hidden biological operating system that actually governs your recovery, your emotional resilience, and literally how you age. Think of your body as an incredibly complex machine. We're not just talking about catching some extra Z's here. We are decoding the invisible forces and fundamental systems that dictate your entire biological trajectory.
Now, for someone who sleeps normally, drifting off into unconsciousness is practically a masterclass in two hidden mechanisms. First, there's automaticity, which basically means sleep initiates involuntarily, without you even trying. And second, there's plasticity, which is your brain's amazing ability to just seamlessly bounce right back after a random late night out. When your system is running perfectly, good sleep is just the default setting. But to understand how this machinery breaks down, we first really need to understand the engines driving it.
Beneath the surface, every single night is controlled by this relentless push and pull, literally a dual-engine system. On one hand, you have the homeostatic sleep drive, which is a physical pressure that's building every single minute you're awake. And on the other hand, you have your circadian alerting signal. That's your biological master clock deeply tied to your pineal gland and the release of melatonin. For you to get that deep, restorative rest, these two powerful systems absolutely have to align perfectly.
Let's zoom in on that homeostatic drive for a second, what we often just call sleep pressure. So every hour you're awake, your brain is burning energy, right? And as it does, it leaves behind this chemical byproduct called adenosine. You can think of adenosine as the literal chemical weight of wakefulness. It just keeps building and building in your brain, actively weighing down your nervous system until it hits a breaking point. And the crazy thing? You cannot hack this. The only way to clear out that chemical debt is to literally rinse it away with deep, consolidated sleep.
But this raises a really fascinating mystery. If normal sleep is just this purely automatic process driven by inescapable chemical pressure, how do we accidentally teach our own brains to stay awake? To answer that, we have to look at a major glitch in our neurobiology, chronic insomnia. We're going to see exactly how our own everyday behaviors can accidentally override our deepest biological drives, turning what should be a totally natural process into a nightly battleground.
Sleep scientists actually use this brilliant fire analogy to map out this exact glitch, calling it the 3P model of insomnia. First, you have predisposing traits. Maybe you're naturally just a bit more anxious or hyper-alert. Think of that as the fuel. Next, you have a precipitating event, like a sudden stressful life change, which acts as the spark. But here's the real revelation. It's the perpetuating behaviors, the coping mechanisms we adopt, that act as the oxygen. They are what keep the fire roaring long after that initial spark of stress is completely gone.
So what exactly is that oxygen? Well, paradoxically, it's our most desperate attempts to fix the problem. I'm talking about behaviors like taking afternoon naps, sleeping in on the weekends, or lying in bed for 9 hours just hoping to scrape together 5 hours of broken sleep. By spreading a tiny amount of sleep over a huge window of time, you're not actually catching up on rest. You're actively starving your brain's natural drive for sleep and completely destabilizing your circadian rhythm.
And that builds into something even more deeply rooted in our biology. Because at this point, it's not just about chemistry anymore, it's about behavioral conditioning. Think about it. What happens when your own bed physically transforms into a threat? When you're spending hours upon hours tossing, turning, and staring at the clock, your brain is actually learning a very specific and very dangerous lesson about your environment.
Researchers call this phenomenon conditioned cortical arousal. For a normal sleeper, simply getting into bed is a powerful cue for rest, safety, and letting go. But if you're struggling with insomnia, hundreds of nights of lying awake subconsciously teach your limbic system that the bed is actually a theater for panic and effort. The biological line between resting and basic survival gets totally blurred. Your bed literally becomes a trigger that spikes your nervous system, turning what should be a sanctuary into a place of stress.
Now, before we look at how to execute a systemic reset, we have to confront some basic biological realities about our actual sleep needs. These needs are genetically determined, and they shift radically as we age. As you can see, for adults between 18 and 64, we're generally looking at 7 to 9 hours. For those 65 and older, it drops a bit to 7 to 8 hours. Honestly, overestimating how many hours of sleep you think you need to be in bed is usually the very first misstep in breaking your sleep architecture. So how do we actually cure this glitch? Well, the world's leading clinical guidelines don't rely on fear, sensationalism, or even popping a sleep pill as a first line of defense. Instead, they use a highly counterintuitive biological hack: It's the core of what's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBT-I. And we are talking about literally reaching into the brain and manually reprogramming its neurobiological switch.
This hack is known as sleep restriction therapy. And I know it asks an exhausted, sleep-deprived person to do the absolute unthinkable, spend less time in bed. But by temporarily shrinking your time in bed to strictly match the amount of time you are actually sleeping, you artificially maximize that adenosine pressure we talked about earlier. You stop diluting your sleep drive. You force that chemical weight to build up so fast and so heavy that the brain has no other choice. It just has to trigger deep, consolidated sleep.
The protocol itself is a strict mathematical rewiring of your nervous system. First, you calculate your actual, real sleep time over 2 weeks using a sleep diary. Second, you set an uncompromising wake-up time. And I mean uncompromising, no matter how terribly you slept the night before. And third, you dramatically delay your bedtime so that the time you spend in bed perfectly matches your actual sleep time. Now, every single hour you're in that bed carries undeniable, maximum biological pressure.
And we pair this restriction with something called stimulus control to systematically sever that toxic link between your bed and your anxiety. The rules are simple but strict. Use the bedroom only for sleep and intimacy. Get rid of the screens. Only go to bed when you are genuinely sleepy. And crucially, if you can't sleep, you have to physically get out of bed. You are retraining your nervous system to realize that the bedroom is a sanctuary for unconsciousness, not a place for effort and worry.
The truly profound takeaway from this explainer isn't just about curing a bad night's sleep. It's the massive realization that you are not at the mercy of a broken biological system. By changing your behavior, you literally dictate your biology. You are holding the operating manual to your own nervous system, your emotional resilience, and your ultimate human potential. So, I'll leave you with this question to chew on. If your daily habits can accidentally break the hidden machinery of sleep, what other incredible biological systems can you actively rewire, starting tonight?